Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments, today we'll focus particularly on the situation in the Gaza Strip from different angles, as well as the Syrian file, Syria, Lebanon, northern Israel in particular. But before that, it's important to remember that 537 days have passed since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched their horrendous onslaught on southern Israel, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping some 250 people. 59 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Now, there has been a meeting last night between the Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister, Ron Dermer, who is also leading the Israeli negotiating team, with the lead American negotiator, namely presidential envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, during the course of which they deliberated efforts to bring some type of fruit from the ongoing talks, despite any breakthrough being in the offset. But nonetheless, ongoing efforts are being made. And I'd like to turn now to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, usually no news is good news, but nonetheless, is there any good news these days?
Well, no good news today, except for Israelis. It is good to know that a week or even 8 days into the resumed operation in Gaza, there have fortunately been no casualties. It's a casualty-free maneuver up to now on the Israeli side. Of course, this being war, it could change any moment. Of course, hopefully it won't. But this is as far as good news is concerned. Now, the declared top priority of Israel now is getting the release of these hostages. 22 to 24 of them are probably alive. We have seen two of the remaining hostages on a clip shot by Hamas, and they presented themselves as prisoner number 21 and prisoner number 22. So there are apparently at least 22 prisoners. And obviously, this is one of the topics, perhaps the topic in the Witkoff-Termer talks, but there is no breakthrough yet because there is hardly any flexibility on either side. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in a Knesset speech, said that Israel will go on with the operation and capture more territories in Gaza in order to facilitate the release of the hostages. But as of now, it has not happened yet. The Israeli Defense Forces is also conducting maneuvers or exercises in the West Bank, including helicoptering some troops to simulate the response should an October 7th attack suddenly take place in the central or eastern sector of Israel.
The best way to avoid war or atrocities, the ancient Roman wisdom, or Latin wisdom at that, is prepare for war. And for our two additional distinguished guests for today include Major General in Reserve Gilshon Cohen, formerly the commander of the defense colleges in Israel, as well as the Northern Corps commander, and a long list of other positions, alongside also Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, formerly the IDF Chief of Cyber Staff, and Israel Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot. And I'd like to start with you, General Cohen. When we're talking about the ground maneuver right now taking place in Gaza, we're seeing a gradual intensifying maneuver with clear-cut objectives. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree is this gradual implementation ratcheting up pressure on Hamas's capacity to withstand?
You said the right appropriate words, gradual deployment, because this really exemplifying the fact that Israel is, the IDF is not going directly to a massive fast victory against Hamas, but the mode of operation emphasizing that we are trying to create a new effort in order to push Hamas to a kind of flexibility in the negotiation to bring the hostages. If that was not true, it was really necessary to deploy the forces much faster and to deploy much more of them, because right now there is still not a calling of reservist units, and it is really going gradually, step by step, quite successive, making an effort, but not bringing the desired victory that Prime Minister Netanyahu really promising to deliver. So that's the situation now. And as we said before, it could really be developed to that form of stopping another ceasefire, to bring another ceasefire and negotiation and bring more hostages, or if absolutely not, to really make a change with the mode of operation.
Thank you, General Cohen. General Rosen, when we're talking about the current state of play, during the course of the meeting between Witkoff and Dermer, there was a discussion about upping the pressure on both mediators involved, of course, in the talks vis-a-vis the Islamist Hamas, namely Qatar and Egypt. Do you see them doing something differently that would exert additional pressure on this terrorist organization to succumb to Western demands, particularly those of the United States, in releasing a number of hostages, including all hostages at that, but nonetheless also ensuring that they lay down their arms and reach an understanding that will guarantee that this Hamas organization does not remain in the Gaza Strip in the future context?
As Gershon noted, the number one goal of Hamas is to stay in power. And the number one goal of the war from Israel's side is to remove Hamas from any kind of future of Gaza. We're actually seeing some breaks in how the population in Gaza is breaking from the hardships of a year and a half of war. We're starting to see how people are not afraid of saying that they want Hamas to go away. Not to say that this is something that will break Hamas, because that's the whole point of a terror organization that's holding a piece of land. They don't really care what the people like or not like, but still there is a burden here from Hamas's side, and popular the popular vote, if you will, is important especially for recruitment of new young people that will die during the war and in the next months if they continue. The brokering parties are in a different position. They have other interests. Egypt doesn't want to take the hundreds of thousands or 500,000 or more of Palestinian refugees. They don't want to do that, but they are leaning on the U.S. Support, just as Israel is one of the biggest donors to the Egyptian defense apparatus is the United States. It's I think it's the second largest after Israel, if I'm not mistaken, and Qatar has a different interest in sort of staying in the legitimate side of the world. After all, this war is putting a huge burden on their brand, right? Their brand is sort of beaten also in the United States proper, with the universities and where the money is coming from, and various other issues. So right now, what I'm seeing from my side is I think the United States is trying to broker this through pressuring under the table, not saying this openly, but I think the discussions with both with Egypt and Qatar should be pretty tough by leveraging what the United States can leverage and hold them responsible for. And I think we're seeing some of it both on the Egyptian side, opening of the corridor outside of Gaza. Gazans are leaving by hundreds, not by thousands or hundreds of thousands, but they are getting out of Gaza. And maybe the Egyptians will capitulate in a way and receive a big number of refugees. I don't know yet. And same with Qatar. We will see how this really is, developing in the next few days, vis-a-vis the hostage deal itself. So let's see who's the best broker here. Is it the Qatarians or the Egyptians? Right now, the Egyptians are on the upper hand in the brokering of the hostage deal.
Well, the Qataris have an interest, naturally, to have Hamas, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, survive, as opposed to the Egyptians, who see Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists, plain and simple. Now, I think it's important to point out and to highlight that in recent weeks, there was a lot of chatter with regard to Egypt and its intentions vis-a-vis Israel. There are many things that the public does not know, and those who speculate with regard to Egypt versus Israel are not privy to, including the fact that Israel is a very significant donor and supporter of Egypt's defense establishment, and beyond that, from agriculture to water irrigation to many of the civic challenges that Egyptian authorities are facing. Israel is instrumental in assisting this country not only survive, but also flourish. And therefore, there are a lot of aspects that many people do not take into account when considering just one small element of various deployments in the Sinai Peninsula, which, of course, have their own reasoning behind that. But nonetheless, let's shift gears now to the north. Particularly Syria. There were a few clashes in the southern part of Syria, another aerial strike in the T4 airbase, and other hostilities that were reported. Mr. Owen, what can you tell us about that?
Yes. So the Israeli government has decided that for the time being, until the Damascus regime is stabilized, until it proves its benevolent intentions vis-a-vis Israel and its ability to control all of the hostile militias and gangs operating throughout the country. But of course, from the Israeli point of view, especially in the southwestern area bordering Israel, until that time, Israel will deploy forward and will not hesitate to preempt and protect its territory and its troops from every single appearance of what might later emerge as a threat. So if there are suspicious movements, Israel shoots first and asks questions later. If there are military assets, be they aircraft or armored personnel carriers or old rockets left behind in an airfield or a depot, Israel does not wait for the hostile forces.
Unfortunately, we lost connection with Mr. Oren, but we'll turn immediately to General Cohen. General, you're privy naturally to the various developments in Syria, and one point that I keep focusing on, and that is something that I might diverge a little bit from what Mr. Oren just mentioned. Israel does not recognize the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham organization that is a offshoot, supposedly, of the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization, has, of course, shifted the source of its funding from Al-Qaeda to Turkey, but ultimately its jihadist aspirations and ideology are one and the same, and they're one and the same not only with Al-Qaeda, but also with the Islamic State, which raises also many questions as to what is the dynamic, irrespective of the public appearance of animosity, what is the dynamic between this HTS regime trying to consolidate its power in Damascus and over the entirety of Syria, and this radical Islamic State that has tens of thousands of its members incarcerated in jails in Syria?
So, in order to understand the Israeli policy, we must realize that in the understanding of the Israeli leadership, we are perceiving the situation in Syria yet under deep uncertainty. We cannot really trust that they are going to create an open society, giving rights to minorities. We just got witnesses of what happened with the massacre against the Alawi, including forces that came from Turkey, Turkmenis, and others. And the fact that Ahmed al-Shara, in a way, would be committed to lead a Sharia state really is not at all beginning to be a promise for all the minorities and not for Israel. Therefore, what Israelis are doing now in Syria is a leverage in order to keep a position in which we can intervene and be part of influence about what's going on in Syria, basically close to the Israeli border and to the Jordanian border, with a very, very direct attention to the Druze, Jabal Druze, in which we have more than 700,000 Druze residents, and Israel, as was declared by Israeli Prime Minister, committed to give them support, maybe not to really direct intervention, but a promise to support them if they will be found under a threat.
Absolutely, naturally. Those commitments have already materialized twice, and that has sent a signal directly to the Al-Qaeda affiliate organizations in Damascus, including Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who, even though he might be outwardly trying to convince the international community, and particularly the United States and the West, that he is seeking to reform and to ensure that the reform is in a broad sense, going to impact the livelihoods of all Syrians. Nonetheless, the jihadist and Salafist elements under him would never allow him to accomplish that promise, and that is something that is ultimately going to trickle down to reality on the ground. But General Ozen, from a strategic perspective, looking specifically at Syria, it is a fluid conundrum, since on the one hand, we don't want to see those Salafist and jihadist forces raising themselves into positions that may threaten Israel, but we also don't want to see the Islamic Republic return with its various Shiite militias that are a threat not only to Israel, but to the entire region.
Yeah, post-Assad Syria is now a vacuum, pulling in everything around it from radicals, rivalries, and foreign agendas. That's the bottom line right now. 15 years of civil war do not end in a quick fall, after the quick fall of the Assad regime. It's a volatile vacuum. Extremists will, until they finish shaping what they want and how the future looks for them, and the remnants of the ISIS that are in the northeast and as you mentioned. Syria is right now becoming another launch pad, and I'm afraid that the only let's call it strategy for now from the Israeli side, as General Cohen mentioned, is to take care of the close border right now and try to influence as much as it can on the future of Syria with the relevant forces. We keep talking about the rivalry between Turkey from the north that was backing HIT and made all this possible through a very long investment in HIT, and a successful one, and now it wants to cash on this and deploy into Syria. That's one side, and the other, and the support, of course, from Qatar with Turkey. In that sense, they are aligned. And on the other hand, you have the Saudis, which have investments both in Jordan and they want to see influence in the new Syria with Ahmed Shara and Lebanon. So this is now what's going on. We have pressure from the northern agenda and pressure from the southern agenda. The southern agenda is the Saudis. They want to be regional in their vision for the future of the region. They have a very different vision than the Turks. So this is what we're going to see for the next. I'm afraid it's going to take a lot of time. I'm betting on it's going to take a few years to settle down Syria, whether it is a cantonized Syria or with shared influences from the north and from the south, as I mentioned. It might be the best future for Syria. Maybe cut it into cantons that are sort of independent in many ways and have foreign support from the relevant parties that want to see stability, each one from a different angle. That's what we're going to see in the near future.
Thank you, General Rosen. I think that it's important to highlight that in the 2025 threat assessment of the American intelligence community that was also discussed yesterday at length at the U.S. Senate's hearing or committee on intelligence and hearing on that specifically, the document relays the following, and that is very interesting, that the HTS-led interim government forces, when they launched their offensive against the so-called remnants of the Assad regime in the Alawite regions of the coastal areas in Latakia, Tartus, and other areas of that vicinity, it notes here that the HTS-led interim government forces, along with elements of Huras al-Din, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate, and other jihadist groups engaged in violence and extrajudicial killings in northwestern Syria in early March of 25, primarily targeting religious minorities that resulted in the death of more than 1,000 people, including Alawi and Christian civilians. Now, this indicates that even though it claims to reform, it is still cooperating with al-Qaeda openly. And the intelligence community in the United States, and I'm sure also European intelligence agencies, including here in Israel, know this full well. So I'm asking myself, to what degree are they going to accept those points, the fact that they're not reformed. They're just playing it plain and simple, and the various considerations in the West are focused, of course, on considerations related to Turkey and Qatar rather than HTS proper. There is 1.5 minutes to each of you where you can speak about anything. So just bear with me for a moment, General Rosen. We'll start with General HaKohen. In 1.5 minutes, what should we focus on in the next 24 hours? I know we did not discuss the Iranian file in today's edition.
Of course, if we are not speaking about Iranian, we must speak about the American offensive against the Houthi, that's going to be really more serious than before, and it is a message to the region. What really that message will deliver to all the agents, we must just come with open mind to study. Of course, a lot of implication will come out from that.
Absolutely, the vitality of ensuring freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, sends signals to the entire world, not just to the region, something that is vital. And of course, the deployment of more than 7 B-2 bombers able to carry the Moab bomb and other heavy munitions are also a very strong signal, diverting them to Costa Varda, among other locations. We won't go into details, but nonetheless, General Rosen, the 1.5 minutes are yours.
Yeah, I think besides the Houthis, which is a huge issue now with the change of the president, a new president, a new sheriff in the region, I think that the future of Lebanon will be very much determined on how we deal with Syria, because everything spills over into Lebanon. Unrest in Syria means unrest to all the different sects in Lebanon, and Lebanon by itself will not be able to survive without support, very strong support coming from the Europeans and the US and Israel if needed. If Lebanon changes its paradigm of Israel with the Saudis, we might be able to build a stronghold, a new stronghold, kicking Hezbollah outside of being a dominant force to determine Lebanon's future, and maybe with that create some kind of future which is good for the region, and also something that reflects and sort of shows Syria what future it holds if it doesn't go the right way.
Well, I share your optimism, or your cautious optimism at that, but nonetheless, despite having a lot of respect for General Joseph Faoun, who I think is a stand-up individual with concrete interests to better the future of the state of Lebanon, there are also people like Nawaf Salam, who is not necessarily a very good actor, so to speak, and is very prone on anti-Israeli sentiments, along with other radical elements within Lebanon and outside of Lebanon. So that is also something that we need to take into account. But with that, I'd like to immediately thank Major General in Reserve Gershon Cohen and Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, as well as Mr. Amir Oren, who is not with us right now, but will be here once more probably tomorrow. And with that, I'd like to thank both of you, and to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.